Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Noel de Guzman. I am the current acting chair of the Economics Department of Ateneo de Manila University. I want to welcome you to our seminar series. It ran from August to December 2024. This event is brought to you in partnership with the Congressional Policy and Budget Research Department, or CPBRD, with participation from representatives of various House committees and distinguished members of the House of Representatives, or HREP. As part of the recently concluded HREP Ateneo Evidence-Based Research Project, 13 studies were submitted to the Philippine House of Representatives. These studies, packaged as the Special Working Paper Series under the Ateneo Department of Economics and Ateneo Center for Economic Research and Development, cover a wide range of topics designed to support Marcos Jr. administration's 8-point agenda. So these include initiatives aimed at protecting the purchasing power of families, reducing vulnerability and mitigating the pandemic's effects, ensuring sound macroeconomic fundamentals, creating more quality and green jobs, facilitating government right-sizing, and establishing peace and order. So today, we will have a 40-minute presentation followed by a 20-minute Q&A, providing ample opportunity for in-depth discussion. Just a quick reminder, though the House rules were already shown earlier, let me run through them again quickly. So first, we let the speaker finish the presentation before we open the floor for questions. So for our Zoom participants, kindly stay muted and keep your video off during the presentation. When we move into the Q&A, simply raise your hand virtually, and once acknowledged, you can unmute and ask your questions. Alternatively, you can send your questions via the chat box or chat directly. Now, lastly, materials from this seminar will only be shared on our website with the speaker's consent. Okay, so today's presentation titled Productivity Enhancing Research and Development, Public Spending and Institutions examines the pivotal role of R&D in driving innovation and fostering economic growth in the Philippines. The study addresses key challenges such as low investment levels, restrictive procurement policies, insufficient human capital, and the absence of a cohesive vision for innovation. It proposes actionable strategies to overcome these obstacles, including defining a focused innovation agenda, tackling systemic bottlenecks, and promoting efficient data sharing and collaboration among stakeholders. By leveraging digitalization to streamline processes and enhance synergies between government, private sector, and research institutions, the research outlines a comprehensive roadmap to maximize productivity through strategic public R&D investment, ultimately positioning the Philippines to harness its innovation potential more efficiently. Our speakers for today are Dr. Benjamin Radoc and Dr. Karl Robert Jandoc, both esteemed experts in economics and research and development. Dr. Radoc is a behavioral economist and principal researcher at the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP Research Academy, specializes in consumer behavior, financial decision making, and competition policy with extensive experience from the Philippine Competition Commission, the Asian Development Bank, and commercial banking. Dr. Handok, an associate professor and research director at the University of the Philippines School of Economics, focuses on microeconomics, game theory, and energy economics. A UP scientist for 2023 to 2025, he holds a PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Together, they bring invaluable insights into R&D policy and innovation-driven economic growth. So, please join us in welcoming our distinguished speakers with a warm round of applause. Dr. Radoc, you have the floor.
Sir Noel, thank you for the introduction. Just checking if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, sir. We can
Yes.
hear you
Okay.
clearly po.
All right. So let's wait until the deck is shared. Okay, so while we wait, as mentioned earlier, this research project is part of the a joint project between the House of Representatives and Ateneo. The materials that we will present today, so a part of this was presented to the House of Representatives last year. And what we did was to rewrite the paper, and we came up with a new title. The title is Public R&D Spending, Recent Issues in the Philippines. And this is forthcoming in a journal called Millennial Asia. And there's a special issue on the Philippines, so that's where it's coming out. So my co-fellow researcher for this project is Karl Robert from UP. And then we also did work with three others, three PhD candidates back then from UP. Although Dr. Kyocho is already now with Ateneo, so she has finished her PhD. And we also did work with three others from the House of Representatives. So there are several of us who worked on this particular project, and we are also co-authors. So let me begin with some interesting stories, some success stories abroad. So you've probably heard of Giant. So it's a bicycle seller in Taiwan. it was able to propel its business when it partnered with Schwinn in 1985. Uh, and a particular strength in their partnership was that Giant partnered with the Industrial Technology Research Institute in developing advanced materials which were used in the production of bicycles. So now they specialize in carbon fiber bicycle frames, and they have several distribution outlets worldwide. Now, another success story, next slide, is on salmon production in Chile. So in the 1960s, Chilean salmon industry was non-existent, but with a prospective big buyer like Japan, the partnership between Japan and Chile allowed them to explore good farming sites. So there is an agency called Corfo, which funded technologies in emerging industries such as salmon. Fundación Chile created and marketed a brand called Salmones Antarctica, which was sold to Japanese investors. Fast forward in 2022, the salmon industry in Chile now exports, the value of their exports is at 22 billion 2 years ago, which accounted for 7% of Chile's total exports. Another example, of course, we know, especially those among you who like luxury brands, Italy is well known for leather goods. Now, you probably don't know that most luxury goods are designed and manufactured in one area, somewhere in Venice. So it's called Riviera del Brenta. What's interesting about this setup is that the firms specialize in design, prototype development, and production engineering in partnership with government. So there is a local association, and it's also supported by a design school called Politecnico Calzaturiero. What that means is you could imagine an area in the Venetian region where they have created a hub where the design, the manufacture, and the marketing is specialized in that area. In addition, given the large market for these types of products, there's also specialized finance that's provided through a cooperative. Now, as I've said, these are very inspiring stories, very inspiring explanations, very inspiring examples. So on the next slide, there's a study by Bresnitz in 2022 where what he did was to try to come up with a categorization of different types of innovations. So by definition, an innovation is any activity along the process of taking new ideas and also devising new or improved products and services and putting them in the market. So you'd notice here that our innovation is not just doing research and development, but it's when you have R&D outputs and then you translate it into something that could be commercially viable, and that's innovation. So innovation, as noted by Bresnitz, can occur in different stages. So you have invention, design and prototype, product and component innovation, and production and assembly. So this is to get ahead of myself. In the Philippines, although we have several researchers, although DOST, the Department of Science and Technology, has many different institutes that focus on R&D, the primary challenge in the Philippines is the take-up of industry players into commercializing whatever R&D outputs are out there. Now, innovation agencies can have many models. So they could be productivity facilitators, directed upgraders, or state-led disruptors, especially when there's a missing market. And they could be transformation enablers. But whatever the model, in the results of Bresnitz, he established that in all cases, R&D takes a center stage and it serves as an engine for innovation. Now, with that in mind, let's now consider where the Philippines is relative to other countries. On the next slide, we compare the performance of the Philippines in terms of gross expenditure on R&D. So it's called GERD. So here we show selected countries. Note here that the data are quite dated. So the latest available that we got hold of when we completed the project was in 2018. But I presented this paper in the Fiscal Policy Conference 2 weeks ago, organized by the Department of Budget and Management. And they noted that there are particular data sources online that we can look at for us to have to be able to update the data set. So nonetheless, if you just look at the where the Philippines is or where the Philippines was in 2018, in terms of GERD, the GERD rate of the Philippines was 0.32, which is very low compared to the likes of Korea, Japan, China, Singapore, or even Thailand and Malaysia. So it's a long way to go for us to be able to reach this level of gross expenditure on R&D. Now, to the next slide, how about the number of researchers per million inhabitants? So in the Philippines, you have in 2018, you have 172 researchers out of a million. You compare that with, again, the likes of Korea, Japan, and China. That makes you think then that, government spends quite a large sum of money to support college students and high school students who specialize in science and technology for their studies. But the next question there is, after they graduate, what do they actually do? So later on, we'll touch into that particular issue. And then on the next slide, we also look at the source of funding. As you would probably imagine, spending on R&D could be provided by government, it could be provided by businesses, or maybe it could come from abroad. Now, if you look at this slide, you'll notice that in the Philippines, bulk of the spending comes from government. And if you look at the column under business enterprise, you have 38% of R&D spending comes from businesses. And that's muted, that's quite low compared to economies with a stronger R&D culture like Korea, Japan, and China. So what we're saying here is this information somehow points to the difficulty or the lack of linkage between the initiatives of government and the initiatives of the business sector. And then next, we look at the annual estimated R&D budget across selected countries. So maybe it's worth noting that for our team, in estimating this R&D budget, what we had to do was to do a line-by-line check of the General Appropriations Act for 2020, 2021, 22, and 2023, and determine the pattern, particularly which particular agency gets the bulk of R&D, the R&D budget. However, those of you who probably have looked at the GAA, the General Appropriations Act, determining whether a particular line item, whether a particular budget item actually is spent on R&D could be quite difficult given how the line items are described. So when we presented this to Congress, we did recognize that this estimation of the R&D budget could have some noise into it, but nonetheless, it provides a clear guidance on which among the government agencies get the bulk of R&D of the R&D budget. Now, on top of the list, there's no surprise. You have the Department of Science and Technology. So if you look at the level of budget in the past 2 years, so it's quite stable. It's followed by the Department of Agriculture and followed by the SUCs, the state universities and colleges. Now, note that this budget for SUCs, this includes all state universities and colleges, including the University of the Philippines. Now, what we did was to look at the breakdown of this budget for SUCs, and as it turns out, a bulk of the budget does go to the University of the Philippines. And there are some SUCs that received an annual budget of something as low as 3 million to 5 million, which is really quite low. You could imagine what kind of research can you actually do with that kind of budget. So that is really indicative of the limitations that are faced by smaller SUCs. We did also look at the budget for DNR, DepEd, NEDA, DOH, and DSWD. You'd notice here, which was actually quite a surprise for us, given the importance of the health sector, how come the DOH gets a relatively small amount compared to other government agencies? The explanation for this is that, as I will mention later, under the DOST, there are 3 umbrella councils. There are 3 different R&D councils that support the operations of other government agencies. So that what we're saying is the R&D needs of DOH are supported by the budget that's provided through the Department of Science and Technology. Now, in understanding the R&D set up in the Philippines, it's of course very important to consider the institutional structure and the recent legislations that support R&D. So there are 3 important acronyms here. So what we did was to list them under that picture. So PIA stands for the Philippine Innovation Act. NIASD is the National Innovation Agenda and Strategy Document. And you have NIC, which is the National Innovation Council. So these are documents and institutions that support the improvement of the innovation governance in the Philippines. So of course, it's important to appreciate that all of these initiatives all contribute to the goal of having an innovative Philippines moving forward. Now, let's look at the NIASD. So it has score targets. So if you just look at the row that's colored orange, so that's the GII score, or the innovation score. So in 2022, the Philippines ranked 59th out of 130 countries with a score of 30.7. In 2028, the target is that its score would be better at 35. And assuming that there's no movement across the other countries, the Philippines would be ranked 43rd. And then by 2040, the Philippines would rank 25th. And it's important to note that this score captures different dimensions. So you have institutions, you have human capital and research, you have infrastructure, particularly ICT, market sophistication, meaning the availability of products that meet the demands of industries. And then following on the next slide, you have business sophistication, So this time on the developments or the advancement in the operations of firms. Number 6, you have knowledge and technology outputs. So you have patents and other indicators of knowledge and technology, followed by creative output. Now, naturally, you'd think that the target is quite ambitious, but with the enactment of the PIA, and then you have uh, collaborative actions from of the other government agencies, it is our hope that um, moving forward in the next 2 decades, perhaps, we'd be able to achieve these targets. Now, for this project, bulk of the work that we did was to engage the other government agencies. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Was to engage other government agencies. We talked to them to gather their experience, the good, the bad, in the implementation of R&D related programs and projects. So here we categorized the issues into 3, which also guided our determination of in determining our proposed policy actions that are relevant to the work of Congress. So one of the main issues that was raised is budget management. The first thing what they mentioned was there's a lack of plantilla positions. So um, sure, you have college graduates who have completed science and technology degrees. But the problem is, what is the likelihood that government agencies are actually able to provide a plantilla or permanent positions in order to cultivate the innovate culture of innovation even within that particular government agency. One of the things that was raised is that um, uh, there's difficulty in hiring qualified scientists and researchers. So what usually happens is the projects that are implemented are funded by uh, international partner agencies who could offer more than what a government salary than what they could get from a government salary. So what happens is, you work with these researchers, with these scientists for several years. They get trained, they get better. The problem is, again, without the appropriate plantilla positions, they can't be hired to help institutionalize projects and programs which have been completed. So this clearly endangers continuity and institutionalization of programs and projects that were implemented. Of course, apart from the implementation of projects, it's also necessary that there is a well-established monitoring and evaluation system to determine whether the objective, whether the programs and projects indeed contributed uh, to the goals that were set when the projects were planned. Another operational issue is in terms of budget inflexibility. Let me check. We're still on the previous slide. Can we go back? There you go. Thank you. So there's budget inflexibility. For those of you who are not familiar with the government budgeting process, so every year, a government agency submits a budget to the Department of Budget and Management. And in the budget that is submitted, you have what we call a tier system. So there are projects that fall under tier number 1 and projects that fall under tier number 2. Continuing projects fall under tier 1, while new projects fall under tier 2. Now, if you do R&D, it is natural to come up with new ideas. The problem there is these new ideas, since they are new projects, would now fall under tier 2 and not tier 1. The constraint there is only items under tier 1 are guaranteed to receive funding, and items under tier 2 need to wait a bit before the determination of the budget is granted. So that is one clear difficulty. Another operational issue, as mentioned by the government agencies, is that there is a mismatch in the timing between the R&D programs and projects and industry needs. So every year, the R&D councils within the Department of Science and Technology have a call for research proposals. So they do help these councils assist other government agencies in coming up with proposals, in drafting proposals. If there's a business entity that also needs support in coming up with a proposal, support is given as well. The constraint, however, is that when a project is approved this year, the funding for that only happens 2 years after. So there's a 2-year interval between project approval and funding, which uh, could be a constraint, especially if you belong to an industry that is fast moving. Because maybe now you came up with a proposal because that is the need of the industry. But if you have to wait some time before the research is funded, of course, after funding, it needs to be implemented, it needs to be tested. And then by the time you're ready to roll out the project, to roll out the innovation in and commercialize it, it probably is not an innovation anymore because maybe someone who has worked faster than you has already done the work. So that's a constraint in the a budgeting process. Next slide, please. Now, another category of the issues is what we call procurement, budgeting, and accounting rules. So again, for those of us who are in government would know this. Maybe we even have a personal experience about this or personal feelings. But this is for the benefit of those who are not yet very familiar with the government process. There could be delays in the delivery of equipment and materials. So imagine you have to implement an R&D project and you need an equipment, a scientific equipment that could only be sourced overseas. And if that equipment costs a lot of money, that needs to go through public procurement. So with public bidding or the other options within the public procurement process, that could lead to delays in the delivery of the equipment. Now, with the delay in not just in the delivery but in contracting, if there's delay in contracting, it's possible that you'd have some cost overruns. Maybe by the time you start contracting, the cost has already increased. And if that happens, you now need to get further approval in order to fund the cost difference. And that could definitely be frustrating for our scientists. There's also the difficulty in the realignment of spending categories. Like if you have a spending category that's under MOE and then you want to transfer it under capital outlay because you want to purchase equipment, approval of that could take some time. And again, that could lead to the delay in procurement. So you'd imagine that it's sort of a domino effect. A delay in one step could lead to delays in subsequent steps. There's also the issue on COA, the Commission and Audit, because the government agencies did say that there could be liquidation delays. Now, I don't know how many of us in this room, in this virtual room, are researchers, but in my experience, researchers, we do not really like very administrative tasks. We do not like, yeah, we don't like admin stuff like liquidation. So the issue there is, say you have a government agency with several projects. Now, if say with 10 projects, say one of those projects has not been liquidated properly. Meaning what that means is you've spent the money, now you need to provide the proper documentation in order to make sure that the use of the funds have been appropriate. So that's liquidation. Now, if the liquidation process of one of the projects has not been completed, it is likely that it would affect the performance, the overall performance of the agency, and that could also lead to further delays, to some delays in the funding of the projects of in subsequent periods. So maybe if you've had, if you experience delays in the liquidation of projects in 2024, now if you need funding for 2025, the release of those funds could be delayed unless you're able to complete the liquidation process of projects in 2024. All right. Now, moving on, next slide. There's also the issue of missing markets and weak innovation ecosystem. In our earlier example, for example, in Venice, where you have uh, luxury leather products that's produced there, it was clear in the example that the partnership of government, of businesses, and even of design schools was very strong, with support for funding from a cooperative. Now, with a strong innovation ecosystem such as that, naturally, it won't be very difficult anymore for market players in that area to expand their operations. Now, one problem that was identified by the people we talked to was that there is a problem in technology transfer. So even if there is an R&D output that's produced, maybe there's already a prototype. The difficulty is looking for a manufacturer that is willing to scale up the prototypes in order to commercialize the innovation. One of the things that was identified was that there is uncertainty on the returns on investment if a manufacturer decides to scale up the production. There's also a lack of productivity facilitators that coordinate industry needs and firms or agencies that can provide solutions. So, surely there are several institutes within the DOST that specialize in certain sectors, or they specialize in certain products. But the linkage with businesses, or even with educators or with educational institutions, needs to be strengthened. Now, during my talk at the fiscal policy conference 2 weeks ago, I did mention that one of the things that I'm quite baffled is the 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 fact that we're missing out on the potential profitability of the Manila LME. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. So it's an extract from pili nut, from the pili nuts in Bicol, and the extract, this LME, is used in the production of luxury perfumes or skin products. And what we're missing out is, instead of our farmers taking advantage of the potential high income from this raw material, uh, what happens is we do export the bili nuts, but then the extraction is something that happens elsewhere, and it is these consolidators of the pili nuts which actually make money more than our farmers. So anyway, it's an example where Well, I've learned about this in 2017 and I still don't know what the answer is. So anyway, um, moving forward, so what we hope for to be what we hope to be tomorrow. Next slide, please. So here we look at the situation or what Korea was 2 decades ago. So this picture shows the GERD and private sector R&D in Korea from the period 1964 ending in 2004. So this is quite dated. So it's 20 years old. But we see here that the red line, the upward line, shows a sharp increase in the GERD to GDP ratio, uh, uh, which would be our the envy of the Philippines. Now, one of the questions that we did receive when we presented this material to the House of Representatives was that if you already have R&D products, if you already have innovations that are produced in other countries, why don't we just focus on adopting these innovations and not spend on doing the innovation ourselves? Um, but we were told that, for example, if you have new medicine that is developed in Germany, before that new medicine could be used in the Philippines, testing needs to be done, and that's uh, uh, course through the DOST, the FDA in particular, and that is part of the R&D process. So apparently it's not as simple as if you have new technology that's available elsewhere, you just adopt it as is when you import it here in the Philippines. Well, that's an aside. But nonetheless, what this particular slide is quite interesting because it that from the table below, it shows the historical changes that could happen along the innovation time frame or the R&D time frame. So there's industrial policy, and this it also indicates the role of government. So moving forward, this is something that the government could consider. Naturally, but of course, given a fixed pie under the GAA, the General Appropriations Act, again, this was something that was discussed quite extensively when we did the fiscal policy conference. If you have the Philippines as a developing country would have several expenditure considerations. So sure, we do recognize that R&D spending is very important, but it needs to be weighed against other development objectives of the Philippines, such as health, education, and others. But anyway, now let's now look at some low-hanging fruits that are available, that could be prioritized. We need a clearly articulated innovation policy framework. So the question here is, should we focus on existing clusters? Maybe should we just focus on areas like Laguna, I don't know, or maybe Nueva Ecija for agri, or do we enter into emerging industries? So it's a policy question, which we hope that bodies like the National Innovation Council would be able to identify. There's also the proposal to relax the Republic Act 9184 on the procurement. Um, we were one of the participants from the Senate during the earlier conference. I noted that um, the Procurement Act has been amended already. However, we note that the issues on procurement that are specific to science and technology projects remain to be unaddressed. So hopefully there could be some room to relax the requirement on procurement, because without this, even if there's money, the disbursement of R&D funds could be limited. Next, we also need to help strengthen the local R&D culture and innovation ecosystem. So next slide, please. So to provide and facilitate semi-public goods, so like education, even data sharing among government agencies. If you, for example, uh, if there's data from the DA, there's data from DNR, and then if there's data sharing with the DOST or even with state universities and colleges, then that could help uh, determine appropriate products that could end up to be innovative. And then there's also issues on finance, the availability of funding, or the willingness of credit providers to gamble on innovators. And then you have issues on legal, particularly specialized contracts. Next, finally, last slide. We also need to rationalize research centers and determine parameters, whether they should be established or not. So while we worked on this project, there was a proposal to build an research institution that's focused on bamboo R&D. So if the objective is that bamboo could be used in construction, the next question is, does the National Building Code of the Philippines provide regulations and standards to be able to allow the use of bamboo, or use bamboo in the production of large production of furniture, for example? Now the question there is there will there be sufficient support in marketing for these products? So for this project, we've raised more questions than answers because the main audience for this particular research output was the House of Representatives, that hopefully could be useful in determining their next policy action. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Radoc, for that very interesting presentation. So now we are entering the question and answer portion of our program. So for the participants, if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, you can also type your questions in the chat box and our staff will monitor that.
Sir Noel, Karl Jandoc is here, so he'll answer the questions.
Yeah. Dr. Handok can also answer questions. Anyone from the Zoom room? Okay, there's one in the chat box, no? So let me read this. This is from Joel Duque. What specific mechanisms introduced in the recent amendments to the Government Procurement Reform Act directly address challenges like procurement delays, bureaucratic red tape, and fund misallocation? And how do these changes improve the productivity of research and development institutions in the public sector? So, Dr. Radoc or Dr. Handok, you can address,
Yeah,
address
yeah,
this.
I can take that question. So, in the revision in the Procurement Act, there's a provision that says if the expense is something like 100,000 pesos, then there's a way to fast track procurement. But this amount is quite small, so you can't really buy new equipment with that amount. So that's one limitation. So it would have been more desirable if maybe a larger amount a larger threshold specific to science and technology projects would have been identified, but that amount was really quite limited. So the question was, is there an amendment that directly addresses the issue? In my opinion, no. uh, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope that answered the question of Mr. Duque. So feel free to raise your hand. Again, I'm calling for questions from the audience or type your question in the chat. Or maybe a comment. It doesn't have to be a question. It could also be a comment. Okay, our staff got a question and they sent it to me via chat. Let me read the question. Given the challenges you highlighted in public R&D spending in the Philippines, such as budget inflexibility, procurement delays, weak technology transfer ecosystems, the question is, what policy recommendations would you prioritize to immediately strengthen the country's innovation governance and foster a robust R&D culture? So, policy recommendations daw, no?
Yeah. Carl, would you like to take that?
Yeah, but let me just answer it tangentially. I think the problem really is like getting the act together, even of government agencies. One problem that we discovered is that there is severe turfing among government agencies. I won't name the government agencies, but uh, one agency is accusing the other of encroaching into R&D activities R&D activities, which is the domain of one department, and so it's hard to coordinate. Sige na nga, pangalanan ko na nga lang. So DOST and DTI. So I hope this is not recorded, but even within those two agencies, this highlights like the weak synergy between public R&D agencies and also the industry, because within the government agencies themselves that are responsible for industry development and science and technology R&D, they couldn't get their act together, and that's a sad thing about this fragmented approach to R&D. So more than just specific policies, I think it's the fragmentation and the mindset of these government agencies that needs to change, and that clearly came out of our interviews with these government agencies, that sometimes they feel that they're being encroached and that this is our domain. I hope that they get their act together. So wala namang taga.
Yeah. If I may add, so there's this body called the National Innovation Council. It's housed in NEDA. The thing though is, when we interviewed them last year, so medyo matagal na eh. Uh, konti sila, sobrang konti. The manpower is so limited for them to be able to even influence the operation or influence the decisions of other government agencies. Because if you have National Innovation Council, which could help coordinate the activities across the agencies, maybe these issues on turf or maybe duplication could be limited already. So even if kasi sa DOST, kahit na meron yung those councils that already exist, it is also quite difficult for them kasi sa kanila it's really more of funding and implementation. But what's important is dapat dugtong-dugtong siya. You do the R&D, you do the innovation work, and then you do the commercialization. But this commercialization part is not really a forte, for example, of the OST, but it could be part of the DTI's mandate already. So that kind of interlinkages in the work across the government agencies should be clearly delineated.
Okay, so perhaps we may have time for maybe one or two more questions, though we are already over time. No, we're going on overtime, but last call for possible questions. Okay, so kung wala na, I suppose we can end this event. So on behalf of everyone here, we sincerely thank our speakers, Dr. Radoc and Dr. Jandoc, for sharing their knowledge and insights with us today. Your contributions have made this seminar both enlightening and inspiring, and we deeply appreciate the time and effort you put into making this event a success. So here we have a reminder to visit our website to access materials from previous seminars and stay informed on past discussions. Next slide. So here you can catch up on previous seminars. So visit the Ateneo de Manila University YouTube channel as well and explore the economic seminar series playlist to watch past discussions. Now, for certificates, if you'd like to request a certificate for today's session, the link to the request form can be found in the chat box. Okay, there it is. And please make sure to complete it immediately as the form will only remain open for 2 hours after the session. Lastly, we'd like to take a moment to thank our incredible support team for their hard work and dedication in making this event a success. So big thanks to Danny Andres, Graduate Assistant of the Department of Economics at Ateneo, Kenneth Arnonobal, Graduate Assistant as well of the Department of Economics here at Ateneo, Lance Bataras, Scholar and um, Assistant to ASERD, Ateneo de Manila. And finally, last but not least, Mr. Rodel J. Crisostomo, IT Tech Support 3 of Ateneo de Manila University. We also would like to extend our gratitude to you, attendees, no, both the regulars and newcomers, for joining us in our seminars ever since it began in August up to now, which is December. We're going to take a short break this December, so this would be the last for this year, but stay tuned for another exciting lineup of seminars starting in January 2025. So to end this event, we wish you everyone a joyful and restful holiday season and happy holidays. But before we go, our staff will do the usual customary picture taking care of Miss Danny Andres.
Hi everyone. If you could please turn on your cameras for a quick photo op. There's just one screen, so this would be really quick. If you can't turn on your cameras, that's fine. You can just do a Zoom react. So I think I'll dedicate around 2 seconds for this. And yes, this is our last session for the semester. So for those, I've seen a lot of people who've been regularly attending. So thank you very much. See you in January again. So taking the first photo in 3, 2, 1. Okay, taking the second photo in 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, and over to you, Baxter Joel.
So that's it. So thank you very much. Have a pleasant afternoon and stay safe. Bye to everyone.
Thank you so much and bye. Thanks, Bing.